everybody. I'm Sarah Ken, BoF Sustainability Correspondent in London, and welcome to today's BoF live event. I'm excited to welcome you to the 5th episode in our online learning series from BoF Live, exploring how to build a sustainable fashion brand. Over the last few months, we've explored what it takes to operate as a responsible fashion business. We've delved into what it means to be sustainable in the first place and how to incorporate that from the moment of design through to the purchasing processes of your company. And you can catch up on all of our previous sessions online. But in this final episode, we're going to make the case for culture, discussing the importance of embedding these principles right in the heart of the way your company operates. I'm really excited about who we've got joining us today. We've got Byron and Dexter Peart, who founded One Des Essentiels. Sorry, guys, founded One Des Essentiels. You're gonna, someone else is gonna have to say that for me. I don't know why I always stumble over it. But have gone on to create Goode, which is a marketplace for everything that is sustainable. And Shea, who is the chief executive of Futerra, the sustainability consultancy. Before we dive into things and everyone corrects my pronunciation on things, which is going to be fun, just a little bit of housekeeping. We would love to get everyone involved in the discussion. We're going to have a chat first, but we're going to leave plenty of time for questions. So please drop them in the Q&A button at the bottom or put them in the chat. And we will invite you guys on to ask them in person if you're comfortable with that at the end. So without further ado, Byron and Dexter, after I completely butchered the name of Want, I wondered if you could talk to me a little bit about, how you went from founding a very successful company to opening Goode, which, does something slightly different. What was the process there and why did you decide to do this now?
Yeah, I'll take a crack at it. Thanks, Sarah. And we're so happy to be here with you and Lucy as well, too. This is going to be a lot of fun. First of all, the company that Byron and I founded was called Want Les Essentiels. So we are here in Montreal. We're here in Montreal, Canada right now, while you're all around the world. And from the very beginning, we thought that that bilingualism in the name was something that was going to resonate. It was really this global brand that we were building from here. It leaves room for people to have a hard time with being able to pronounce the name, but I think that's
ironic because I do actually speak French.
Yeah, that's the world that we live in now. But there's a lot in the name, actually, Sarah. And the idea was about wanting the essentials. And so from all the way back 10, 15 years ago, Byron and I were sort of bouncing around these concepts inside the culture of the company, but also in the brand itself about really trying to focus very clearly on only the things that were essential. What is out there that makes your life a little bit better? In this case, we were making accessories. And so it was all about carrying solutions that were built to last, these items that were going to help you sort of perform better in your day-to-day and that you would keep them for a really long time. And so a lot of that actually, I would say, has evolved into Goode. So I wouldn't say that where we are now is markedly different from where we've been in the 25 years of our career. I think what's changed is that while we've always been curious, we wanted to now really play an active role in trying to shape a conversation and a community around really focusing on design as a really core tenet, and then also purpose and sustainability. And Byron and I had been joking early on when we were in our Want days, and then now with what we're doing with Goode, that I think that our teams have had to listen to is that we really thought that the future of luxury, like this idea of how we would create this paradigm around what luxury really meant, it was going to be around brands that put design as core and intentional, but also put purpose equally as core and intentional into their business. And so what we've done with the marketplace is we've tried to go out to the world and find all of these partners, artists, artisans, makers that are kind of speaking the same language as us. And it's been a lot of fun.
Byron, could you kind of amplify that in terms of, was there a way you approach this differently from one?
For sure. Yeah, no question. And I think it was in some ways a response to our past and our experience with One. It was twofold. We actually, not to go too broadly into what we did, but we built our own brand, Want Les Essentiels, and also had a distribution company where we were importing brands from mostly Scandinavia and Japan. and bringing them to North America. Brands that were first in class with evolution and sustainability, like Nudie Jeans, Philippa K out of Sweden. And we brought those brands to North America. And then with our own brand, we had early on started working exclusively with organic materials, like back in 2000. I want to say 2008. I'm dating myself. We're 48 years old now. And and all of our retailers were just like, we really love that this is important to you guys, but it's not going to resonate with our customer. And if we do have to start telling this to our customer, these value sets about your product, then we have to explain why the other products on the shelf maybe don't conduce in the same way. And that was like, and it was just frustrating. And for, I'd say, about 10 years, going into 2017, we started to realize that if we let the industry or the market kind of pigeonhole or define how we wanted to tell our story, we wanted to make these essential items that you could keep for 10 years. That is totally countercurrent to the fashion industry, right? So they're like, bring us new styles, bring us new trends. And we're like, that was made and has been made for over 8 years to be perfect. And we looked a lot at furniture and interiors, and we're always questioning, why is it that an Eames chair is made the same way now as it was 50 years ago, but then in the fashion business, we're constantly compelled and propelled to change and add newness just for the sake of newness. So yeah, I think the evolution was a large part frustration, and a large part being like, if we have a role and a duty and a responsibility to make change, and we can't accept and expect that change is going to happen on its own. And I'm sure that a lot of people that are on the call today have been looking at their businesses and trying to figure out how they could do it. And one of the best ways that we've always found, and maybe it's because we're identical twins, is to collaborate and work together with others. And we felt that by creating a platform where all of these companies that were like ourselves, who were trying to do good business, doing evolution and impact, could be grouped together to make a more kind of common goal. And that's the path we're on. It's super exciting because I right before we launched, there were some people, are there enough brands around the world that are like this, that are thinking this way? And we were like, there are millions. It was just about bringing these people together. And I think there's a lot of proof of concept that we're working through right now, which is just to make sure that we could bring all these companies together to share stories, common goal, common mission, and amplify.
I think that's really interesting because what you're talking about is sort of having this cultural awareness already and running into frustration that the rest of the industry wasn't sharing it. And, Lucy, I'm curious to hear your thoughts here, because your job revolves around sort of trying to bring that culture to businesses that pre-exist and maybe didn't have it from the ground up in the same way. And I'm curious to get your perspective on where you start with that.
Well, I was nodding vigorously because I've had many of those similar things myself over the years. Oh, consumers don't care. And what if we called this fair trade? What are we going to do about the rest of it? And it's like, come on, guys. So I feel it's quite good that we've started to move a bit beyond that. I actually think the story is quite a similar story for the kind of the born agains, if you like, the born again brands rather than the born good brands that you're featuring on Goode and that you've grown yourselves. In that, if you want to create culture change within or without a company, if you want to create this, culture of solutions so that we can, move beyond strategy, as they say, culture eats strategy for breakfast every time, then one of the core things is to actually make sure the plan's a really good plan in the first place, that it has change built into it, that the plan is based on kind of behavior change tenets, if you like. And one of those, again, picking up on what you started there with Byron and Dexter, is to make sure, and I know that you covered this in your previous workshops, just to spend a moment on it, is that that the plan is based on your own material impact. Keeping things for a really long time is actually pretty much the most sustainable thing you can do, as well as obviously material choice, organic cotton picked up on, for example. So, and consumers overwhelmingly want to see this. Consumers say across our big brand research that product level change is what they want to see. So what our kind of big brand clients or what we work with them on is making sure that before you even think about culture change, that the plan you're doing change around has change built into it. So focus on your own material impact, but then also get a very comprehensive plan but also, you know, communicate it as you do so well at Goode in a beautiful way, in a way that speaks to consumers, in a way that's consistent with your brand DNA, that's consistent with the heritage of the brand. So magic logic, we call it actually at Futerra, that you need to be working on your biggest material impact, the kind of the logic, if you like, but you need to bring the magic of branding, creative storytelling in order to create change. Otherwise, these things just sit on the shelf, quite literally.
Yeah, and Byron and Dexter, because when you guys set up Goode, you sort of really clearly defined for yourselves what you mean by, you know, what qualifies within kind of Goode's realm as good. And, you know, if you go on your website, you sort of pick out all of the different things that you're looking at. And I'm curious to hear, you know, what was the process of establishing what those would be for you? And how have you ensured that everyone in the company is really aligned and is applying that every day?
Yeah, I mean, I'll jump high level and we'll do this like
Yeah.
I'll start up here, and then Byron, I think we'll get a little bit more granular on that question. Sarah, it's a story that we told just a couple of times, but I think it really resonates. Very early on, one of the things that we were really focused on, and based on what I just said before, was that we called it Goode, and we wanted it to be, you know, about this human story, like really getting deep to this inspirational but also aspirational element of that one-on-one, that very close contact where this is not a mechanical you know, business, but rather this is a human business. And then by doing that, you know, you really touch the stakeholders throughout the process, as opposed to thinking about this as a transactional kind of stakeholder business. And so or shareholder business. So I think that very early on we said this was about good people and good impact. And so those were kind of like these two markers, and I call it like these two legs of the three-legged stool. And ironically, for the guys that have been doing design for 20 years, the last one that came to us was good design. And it was weird because it was almost elusive in when Byron and I were I guess, you know, just sort of whiteboarding this in his apartment. But then afterwards, we were like, that was our aha moment, that it's actually good design is that third piece. And so, of course, this is about the impact. And of course, this is about the people. But that part of the solution and part of the answer is that if we design better, and if we put the challenge of design as a cornerstone in how we look at the products that Lucy was just talking about, and thinking about that product level, that we can't just put more stuff into the world or more crap into the world. Like, we really need to challenge that these are things that help improve people's lives. Once we hit that good design piece, everything started to come together. It meant that every relationship that we had, every potential maker that we met, they had to have that good people philosophy, that these are the kind of people we want to work with. We're in our 40s now. It's like we only want to work with people that really touch us, and then have that sort of impact, measurable, very tangible piece to it. And then that third leg of really saying, is this the kind of design that we think inspires? And everybody who's on the site, I mean, you can go through the entire site and you can say every one of the brands that are on there meet good design, good people, and good impact. And so it creates a guardrail around the business that's makes things a lot easier, especially in the middle of a pandemic when you could get lost now. And it says we have to stay the course. Does every story we talk about these things? Does every post that we do on Instagram in the feed speak about these things? And it makes us much more clear and intentional in how we try to drive the mission of the company.
Yeah, I think that's so interesting and important to contextualize it within sort of this very uncertain times, that having that central value system and culture can actually be very stabilizing. Byron, do you have anything you want to amplify there?
Yeah, I think that it was intentional for us, and I never heard the term before, Lucy, born good and born again. So I'm gonna be appropriating that one. I like it. And we are largely born good right now with the partners that we have on the platform. And obviously we're just 18 months in, so we're really just born in gestation period. But this born again, we have I think Dexter and he used the term less but better. So we're not trying to preach at some higher ground. We're basically imploring that constant advancement and betterment is key to this process. I think a sustainability journey is a continuum. There is no finish line. And so for us, we actually welcome brands, companies through the submissions, or who we're discovering who have potentially been in business for 40 or 50 years are evolving and changing their path in this born again. And I like where Lucy was, because I think some of the reaction over the last 2 or 3 years, and definitely over the last 10 months, has been to find that stand, which is authentic and honest. But, and back to the value set and the culture, it really, and Dexter was touching on this, has to be full circle and 360, and that it has to be in your design approach. It has to be in your HR department. It has to be in your hiring practices. It has to be in your marketing philosophy. You can't I think the idea of having this CSR department, which was kind of it's so evolved from there. And I don't think it's logical for companies to think that, and while it's good intention, that unless they're looking at the total business in this born again area, that it's a ship that you have to move, and it takes a lot of action and activity to be able to do that. And I encourage companies to continue to do it, but there is a great opportunity for new entrants as well right now, who could really, from the get-go, formulate that into every bit of brand DNA, into every employee that comes into the company, that they're coming on board for that reason. And I'm seeing this kind of cross current right now, where a lot of companies are trying to adapt and not doing it as authentically as they would have to. Yeah.
Well, and I'm curious, Lucy, in your experience, I think you're absolutely right, Byron. There are a lot of companies trying to adapt because, in part, this is in the air and they need to. What, Lucy, makes a company successful in doing this? Because it is hard.
It is really hard. So a couple of things. I wanted to pick up on the people and the values piece. It's always about the people, whether it's the born goods or the born agains. Oftentimes our clients, and a lot of our clients, even if they're born agains, would kind of consider themselves to be born goods. A lot of the big brands have been, had their sustainability plans for the last 20 years, have been, working behind the scenes on BCI cotton or water, whatever it may be. But it's just not enough. And we all know it's time to go to the next stage, right? Climate change demands it, equality demands it. So as these kind of big brands are looking to really turn a corner, putting the different people together, the sustainability teams with the marketing teams, with the brand teams, quite a lot of the time we go in and we make introductions for the first kind of few weeks and months, like meet so-and-so in brand from sustainability. You are going to be best friends, and you're going to be working really closely on this to craft something which is going to be, again, right for the cultures and ethos of the company, but also be pointing outwards, right? Actually going to get cut through to your consumers, as well as hooking with business strategy and the business plan. So lots and lots about people, and giving it time and building the relationships and being prepared for things to get derailed when, you need to hook in with another system over here. And maybe that's on a 2-year time frame and you thought you were on a 6-month time frame, so lots about that. But the other piece I wanted to pick on towards the end there was, obviously I won't kind of sit here and kind of name names of people that have done it wrong, because, often people are doing that with the best intentions. But we quite often talk about, one of my good colleagues in Futerra has got this amazing benchmark she does around known and trusted. And it's just a good framework to think about how you want, even position yourself internally, or as you kind of position yourself externally, how do you become known and trusted? So how do you become known by doing the kind of the big, the cool things, the resale platforms, or the, exciting above the line, provocative stances, brand stances, but you are trusted when you back it up with the big plan, the consistent plan, the bigger picture, that you're not just talking about labor rights here, you've actually got a consistent plan around all your sustainability impacts over there. So there's quite a bit out there, but in order not to greenwash or ethics wash, you've got to get that cut through and be exciting, but you've got to back it up with the proper plan.
Yeah, I think that's such an important piece there. Like, this is not a quick fix. You can't turn things around overnight. And even if you build it into your company from the ground up, it's something you kind of have to practice every day. And I think, it sort of feeds in a little bit to what you were alluding to, Byron, that I want to return to, because I don't think we can have this conversation without talking about the broader cultural conversation that has exploded this year around race and diversity. And Byron, when you sort of pointed to people trying to make quick HR fixes, I'm thinking maybe you were sort of alluding to that.
Yeah. I think, I'll let you finish your question. Sorry, Sarah. Right.
No, please feel free to jump in.
Yeah, I think, and I just jump off of where Lucy was before. it doesn't matter what you choose that foundational piece to be. I'll actually rewind. The SDGs were a very important kind of baseline for us, because I think when we started, there's the 17 goals, we were just like, what really matters to us? And we identified 6 largely, but 1 profoundly, and that was responsible production and consumption, SDG 12. And I think with that, we were able to frame and advance a lot of our direction forward of what we wanted our company to stand for. And it was really about how could we promote making things more responsibly, and then also appeal to this conscious consumer who was already there. And we knew that that was not just a conversation that was strictly environmental, that there was largely a social component to that as well. There's largely a diversity and an opportunity, equal opportunity component as well too. So everything we do frames around that. And I think that what's ended up, and I would implore that companies now just identify where that kind of bearing or that foundation is, and move in that direction. Because, and I think Dexter was there, it prevents you from swaying or just responding that if there's deforestation in the Amazon, that you have to make a response. If there are fires in Australia, you have to make a response. If there's social unrest in the US, you have to make a response. It's like, why foundationally would you do that unless that reaffirms what your core tenets, your core belief system? And I think that throws off the consumer. I definitely believe it throws off your internal team as well too. Like, why are we doing this now? Why are we saying this? This is not how we interact on a day-to-day basis. So yeah, the HR piece wasn't like a charge point, but I know as an individual, and obviously as a Black business owner, in the early part of the summer, at some point you were just, I could see so much, not even as largely as hypocrisy, but you're just like, the statements that were being made for the sake of, we have to make a statement, instead of really figuring out why was that foundational to their own business and the commitment. That's so I think this year has brought a lot of awakenings, because you kind of, there's so much heightened moments, and there will continue to be more. And if you really are going to respond to all of them, then I think that there's an action that you have to take out throughout the year as well too, not just in those moments.
100%.
I think that's a really, oh, sorry, Lucy, go on.
I was just going to say 100%. If you're going to make a point, then where's your action? Exactly.
Where's your action? Yeah.
I think that's raises some really interesting points, though, and maybe sort of links back to something you said, Dexter, about how that this is a constant journey and it's an evolution. And certainly, I think 2 years ago, when people thought about sustainability, they maybe pigeonholed it as being much more about the environment, and now it's broadened out to have an understanding that there's a very large social component, and it's very intersectional, and that's incredibly important. How should companies be balancing what is now actually oftentimes a very fast-moving conversation and evolution against what you just said, Byron, in terms of needing to be thoughtful and really be able to back up what you're saying publicly with what you're doing internally?
I think the opportunity, yeah. I mean, I first of all, that's an amazing question. We got to write that down. That's a whole masterclass right there. That question.
that's it. Just discuss for the next half hour.
But I mean, the first thing that came to my mind, Sarah, was that, and it sort of feeds into where Lucy was before and where Byron was that probably our whole mindset has been about trying to move quickly through things, right? It's almost like there's a problem in front of us. How do we solve it, and how do we solve it quickly? And so, as I said before, for us, luxury was about sort of design and purpose. We have this other sort of conversation that luxury is very much about time, and that that time is really one of these really interesting conversations. Byron and I just wrote a piece on Goode actually last week about it. But whether you take the pandemic and you see how it slowed down our life, whether you take this conversation that we're having about sustainability or diversity, you could try to rush through these things, but the reality is you don't gain trust, that Lucy was speaking about before, if you try to do it quickly. Time is this one sort of arbiter that is the same for all of us, and without taking the time to be considerate, without understanding that this is hard work, which means that reaching a level of equality or diversity in your company means that you have to just work harder when you're going through an interviewing process, when you're putting people on your management teams, when you're putting impact in your funding portfolio. All of these things take longer. And so our business is about, in so many ways, taking the time to be considerate. Not just, we have about 150 brands right now, Sarah, that are in the pipeline, that a lot of them we hope will be on Goode. We have 50 on the site right now because it takes months to go through that assessment process to be able to bring them on. And so we're hoping that because we are slowing things down, and we actually believe the pandemic, for all of the challenges and difficulties that it's created, I hope that people recognize now that through slowing down, we are probably starting to make better choices. And I would think that this is one of the trends that is going to come out of this, is that it's time to be thoughtful, it's time to be more considerate, it's time to understand that D&I and sustainability are not quick fixes. And to Lucy's point, you need a plan, and that plan should be over years. It should be measurable, it should be actionable. The teams have to understand that we don't get there overnight, and you have to hold yourself to it, you know, on a monthly basis, on a quarterly basis, on a daily basis. And if you don't, you're just going to fall short. I mean, and these things just don't happen in 3 weeks or 6 weeks. It's just as simple as that.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And Lucy, I'd love to hear from you, you know, in terms of holding companies holding themselves to account, you know, what do you find works as goals or KPIs? What should companies be measuring themselves about? But just before you jump in, I just wanted to remind everyone, please do drop questions in the chat. We would love to hear from you. I can keep asking questions all day, you know, but we'd love to hear from you too. But sorry, Lucy, what's your take?
Everything that Dexter said, I again agree with. I love our new friendship blossoming.
Be careful, we're calling you.
All of that, you know, again, 100% agree in terms of, you know, it does take longer to actually make these things work well within a company, and getting the targets and the, you know, your 2030 vision, but then your goals that will take you up to, you know, 2025, and a staggered release of goals we often do with Tommy Hilfiger and Yuxnet Porto, which are two strategies and visions we've worked on pretty recently. They've all got that. They've kind of got rolling innovation plans, and they've got 2030 goals, but then the process by which you get there. I actually think the best way often of driving change internally is by looking externally. And kind of thinking about where I've seen businesses really become the born agains again, if you like to use that terminology, really grab and get hold of things and start to really invest that time and resource, is often when, I mean, it could be that it's a competitor who's getting more reputational benefit, you know, more snaps than they're getting, even though they're doing more work, or the born agains coming to eat, you know, their lunch basically. But that sounds kind of, well, actually, you know, businesses are commercial, so obviously that is going to drive change. But I've seen that kind of, you know, looking outwards to kind of bring some, you know, burning platform inside, really drive change in a very good way, and people still come together in a very human way, you know, to work towards that, you know, North Star, whatever goal you put out there. But oftentimes, yeah, looking outside and making that change visible to consumers, I think is often the best way, because if you do it wrong, obviously you get the Twitter storm and it's terrible. But if you do it right, then you, well, A, you are driving sales, but B, you're you know, you're in the court of public opinion, basically. There's no way of turning back and not doing change after that.
Yeah, I think making yourself accountable externally is a really good one. Byron and Dexter, now that you brought this up, I'm really curious. What are the goals you set yourselves internally that you measure success against?
I mean, I will say, for one, if we speak specifically about, because I think it's relevant to the culture conversation on the diversity and inclusion, we actually have that, and I'll specifically the founder ownership of the partner brands that we bring on the site, percentage in ethnic diversity and also in gender diversity. Then all of the suppliers and employee matrix, like balance that they have also inside their companies. We use KPIs for ourselves for that, so also our internal team for that. We do an assessment with all of our partners that captures everything from waste management, energy use, the materiality, so the contents of the materials, supply chain management, packaging. So we have quite a few, but largely when we're looking at this, very exciting, we're 18 months in. we're doing our first sustainability report, and this is where Lucy's world comes in. So we're going to have our first full year, which is 2020, and then next summer we'll be able to report on a full year of the impact that Goode and all of its partners have been initiating, and that's very exciting for us. It's very exciting that it's difficult because I think one of the exciting things of what we built is that we wanted to have a platform where the smallest social cooperative or artisan could be on the same platform as an established company that's maybe been around for 100 years and has all of the certifications that Lucy had mentioned before. And how do you create an even playing field? And then to have an even playing field, but then also to be able to measure and be accountable in the same way is quite difficult, because maybe a small artisan group doesn't have the ability, whether that be financial or operational, to be able to get that type of certification. So Goode ends up, we have to be in some ways an intermediary to create an environment where all of these partners are cast and measured and accounted for in a fair system as well too. So we built that internally, and it's super exciting. And then all of our KPIs are based around, and my final point, we are in the business of creating a sustainable business as well too. Sustainable trade and opportunity for all of our partners, for Goode, for our investors. And I think that this kind of triple bottom line, which sounds quote unquote, but in any business or anybody who's listening to it, I mean, it doesn't really make sense to go out and initiate a business that you cannot make sense financially for in an industry, and then also have the positive effect for people, and then have a positive effect to the planet as well too. So I think key and core to what it is that we're doing is to make sure that we could have a business that's not only sustained, but will show people that this is a good way to do good business as well too. And I would try to lead by example, that if you operate this way as a maker, or if you're in another industry and you're looking at a marketplace for home goods and you're saying that's resonating with people, then that hopefully also helps to change people's minds and behavior as well too.
I think that's a really good point. And I actually want to flip it a little bit and ask you, we've talked a lot about sort of what you need to do to operate as sort of a sustainable business and have that in your culture. But I'm curious if you guys could sort of delve into why it's like, what's the business case for doing this? Obviously, I think all of us on this call can agree that it's the right thing to do, but financially, does it also have benefits?
Yeah, I mean, I'll take a quick stab at that, and I'm sure Byron will. I think that there's more than enough study out there that's fully available in the world, that this is not just a conversation between Sarah, Lucy, Byron, and Dexter. I mean, it's been picked at from every version that companies that have purpose and impact as cornerstones in their business yield higher profitability, have better retention with their staff, are able to keep their margins and retail prices higher, have stronger relationships with their supply chain. So I think on any real sort of, I'll call it investor metric for lack of a better term, or business case, it is proven that it's good business to lead with impact alongside of sort of, I'll call them more traditional or concepts of how to run a business. And I think the challenge is, and where we've been quite fortunate, is that we do have a market experience background, and then we are building, sustainability, that it's also one of the lenses. For me, in a lot of ways, I see sustainability, because it's always a tricky word, as being another lens when you make a decision. So lens number one could be purely commercial, and then lens number two is this sustainable lens. And once you put on both of those glasses and make your decisions through the optics of, how does this look, people and planet, and how does this look in a sort of more traditional business case, I think once you've been able to say it checks both boxes, then the companies of the future, those will be the companies of the future. It's the other ones that are maybe looking at it purely through their sustainable lens, but not as the business case, are going to be in trouble. And the ones that are looking at it purely through the commercial case with zero impact or purpose are also going to be in trouble. And I think that this misalignment right now is that the market is somewhere in the space of these highly commercial brands, high street brands that are trying to chase this sustainability quotient, or sustainability brands that just don't necessarily understand how to inspire a customer to build that kind of emotive retention around what you're doing and that narrative that you're telling. What we try to do is, in a lot of cases, a lot of these brands that are on Goode's platform are maybe just tremendously good sustainability wise. And then we are able to empower them with having that sort of commercial marketing, and then, you know, digital or operational and logistic power as well too. So we're able to help them do more with what they're trying to do. And I think in a lot of ways, we were on kind of a masterclass with the Parsons School of Design last week, and it's so amazing because, you know, I think the young designers or creators of the future are already thinking through that, through both lenses, frankly, but really through this lens of sustainability. And we need to create platforms for them that could prove to them that what they're feeling in their hearts also makes sense in their minds. And Goode's being built to be able to present, you know, that marketplace for them, that if they're creating something, there is a home for them where they will be recognized and accounted for. And that's a sort of a global proposition for us. It's not just in, you know, these design schools in big cities, but, you know, for these little creators, you know, in some smaller corners of the world who are just as amazing, just as thoughtful, and just as creative.
Yeah,
I think that's, yeah, sorry, Lucy, go on.
On that, yeah, the business case is so clear. In fact, our colleague, our US CEO, Freya, even wrote a book 8 years ago now, I think, called Green Giants, and it laid out what successful businesses who put environmental and social at the heart of their business and brand, and how they went about doing it. And she basically wrote it because she got so sick of people going, oh, well, you know, what really is the business case? Like, but I'm going to write it down. But yeah, there's, you know, Statin survey and resilience and future-proofing and the resilience of businesses within the COVID and lockdown that had environmental and social credentials, I think is really clear. I also love the lens, the sustainability lens. You know, it is a source of innovation. It's a source of future-proofing. It's what we use as well when we help our clients come up with that kind of core thing that's going to be at the heart of their comms or their vision or their plan or whatever it may be. Is, you know, look at what's driving your business, what's your unique contribution to sustainability, and what do your customers, your audiences care about. So I think, yeah, linking that all in is absolutely right. There's one other thing in terms of how to get value, because I can see there's some questions coming in on this in the Q&A as well, which I might not answer precisely, but just on this, well, then how do you get value from it? Dexter, I know you've spoken before about, you know, helping consumers live a more sustainable lifestyle. And I think that is one of the real keys, because we've surveyed people in the US and UK saying, you know, a couple of things. Do you support as big changes to your lifestyle that you've had to kind of put up with on COVID and lockdown? Would you support as big changes for climate change? And people resoundingly say yes. And they don't actually think it will, you know, impact their their lifestyle for the worse. They think it will actually make it better. Just speaking to that whole slowing down piece that you were talking about there earlier, Dexter. But also we ask people, you know, do you want to lead a more sustainable lifestyle? Yes. Do brands make it more easy or more difficult? And actually a huge proportion of people say more difficult. So if we were to stop trying to persuade people that this is important, people are there, they're absolutely there. But if we were just to focus on how our brands and our businesses can help people, how we can be servant brands, how we can actually, you know, come up with solutions, design solutions, tech solutions, whatever the different solutions are that enable people to, you know, keep an item for longer, to use less energy, to live their life in a more equitable way, whatever it may be. I think that's where the value is going to get driven as we go forward.
I'm glad you picked up on some of the questions coming through in the chat, because there are some really interesting ones. And I wanted to pick up on one Chelsea Marie has posted in there, making the point that, you know, she really wants to drive more sustainable culture within the business where she works, but only works in one part of the business. So if you're just, if you are not the person in control, how do you try and make change? And specifically, I think this question focuses from a design point of view. Is there a way to influence the overall direction of a company that way?
Should I jump in?
Yes,
yeah,
jump in.
Lucy,
Sorry, Lucy, I didn't direct that at anyone.
I have to say this is quite a toughie, because I want to say, oh yeah, you know, everything's possible. But so There's quite a few pieces out there, like toolkits from the Global Fashion Agenda, for example. Even, some of those strategies I mentioned from Yves Saint-Porter and Tommy Hilfiger give clear transparency on the materials replacement goals that they're doing. So whether it's organics or recycled polyester or whatever it may be. So there's lots of benchmarks and frameworks out there that kind of do a good, what good looks like, basically. It is quite hard though when there's not a company culture that supports it. So just to say it honestly, it's tough. And some of the things I've seen work over the years is to kind of buddy up, to find your other, sustainability champions within the business, who can start to make that case to, purchasing or the board or the exec, and actually to perhaps bring a little bit of a business case together on this is where we've seen, value being driven. Could we start to perhaps consider this together as a company? Because actually you do actually need that enabling, this is where we're going and why, to actually support, materials replacement, I would say.
Byron, Dex, do you guys have a perspective on that?
I just have a small thing to add, because the thing that in Chelsea's question, which kind of resonated with me, is that she says that she's working for a relatively large company. And I think Lucy's absolutely right. Like, so it's one thing to be a designer if you're working for a small firm. You could affect change probably a lot more rapidly and profoundly. I think that it is a conundrum of the relatively large or large companies. And Lucy was absolutely right. I think the buddy system is probably the only way. There is a certain level of how we make change from a grassroots level in politics or in policy. And I think it has to be the same kind of approach inside organizations, because as much as we'd like to think that person could walk into the CEO or president's office and make that change, it's more likely that it'll happen by them. And I think Lucy was profoundly correct, is them going to maybe see someone that's on the finance team or someone who's in the logistics and operational team and bringing them together. I want to work on this. Is it interesting to you that maybe you want to do something about how we do shipping and packaging or deliveries, and then coming up with the very, very smallest, but still a plan inside an organization. At the end of the day, governments, companies, they'll follow the demands of their employees, I think, and the consumers. The consumer side, there is no shortage of information that's out there. I think Lucy and Dexter addressed it well. I mean, obviously the BoF, you guys just released the State of Fashion. E&Y has reports, McKinsey has reports. They're all, and I think some of this is also just putting this in front of your manager and letting your manager do some of that work to push it higher up as well too. Ultimately, there is pressure that employees have inside companies. There's no question.
I'm gonna give you, Chelsea, you're getting 3 answers on this one. But one of the things to just leave it on a highly optimistic note as well too, Byron and I have been traveling to Première Vision and other shows around the world for decades. And I remember, going to some of these shows, whether it was to see leather or to see materials 10 years ago, and then we'd be like, what do you have, like in that lab section? Like we'd like try to get to the back and try to find these one innovative materials that they were using, and in a lot of cases are like, this is not important to us. And I think one of the things that's really exciting about the times we're in as a designer now is that at the raw material level, I think they've got it now. They've heard from the market that they have to switch up. And a lot of that switching up in the materials, which is that sort of early point of that design process. I think if you can get there and find these materials, they're not necessarily that much more expensive anymore. So I think that that's the place to start as a designer, is to try to, in lingerie, I think you need to go out there and find those laces or whatever that have amazing story behind them, so that when you're communicating your product, where Lucy was before, the product is, just as well made, the price is right so that you can fit it into your costing sheet, but even more importantly, that there is a story behind the maker or the manufacturer of those raw materials that you can show as additional value to that end consumer when they buy it. 5 years ago, that was very hard to find. I think today, I would almost say it's that you're not doing your work, frankly, if you can't find those factories, those mills right now today around the world that will support that initiative. And if you sort of build small and don't try to have these major KPIs from a sustainability standpoint, and you just show your owners or the bosses or the directors right now, look, we did this and look at what we achieved and look at the impact we made, I think you'll get a long way. It's going to take a little bit more time, but the resources are out there. The supply chain is ready, even if the customer is not completely ready and your business is not ready. I'm very optimistic that on the supply chain side, the materials are out there right now. They're highly innovative. We've seen them, beautiful stuff all around the world. So yeah, good luck.
I think that's a really good point, that change doesn't have to be, you don't have to do everything at once. Start with a fabric, go from there. I am going to invite Natalie Quinn to join us now to ask a question, which hopefully will work. I think, oh good, Natalie's joining. Sometimes it takes a little while for the sound to come through. Natalie, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can.
Hi, Natalie. How are you?
I'm currently in the kitchen, so I haven't got the video properly on me. Apologies.
No problem.
We can just see your panettone.
Yeah. The panettone and your grocery list, Natalie. We know it.
Sorry, I'm doing that multitasking thing at the moment.
that resonates. Please ask away.
Yeah, so I was just wondering, I decided to go back to uni, and I'm currently doing a degree in fashion brand marketing. And I'm actually currently writing my dissertation on the second-hand fashion market and sort of the growth of the market, sustainability through the consumer, ethical consumer. I was just wondering how you would recommend that businesses can sort of encourage consumers who currently aren't buying with sustainability in mind to sort of do so in the future, because I think that's something that is at the moment, there's kind of that market that still aren't looking at sustainability when purchasing. So just wondered if you had any recommendations of how businesses can aim to do that.
I feel like Byron and Dexter, do you want to jump in? This is your untapped market. If one of you wants to go first.
Okay, I mean, I'll go first. I think that on the vintage side of our secondhand market, I think there's we talked about this, about longer life cycles of products as well too. I think that one of the things that, as we move through this conversation, I think products lasting longer and then having a secondary life, and looking at products not just for how they work for you, but really being intentional about how they can work for others in the future, is a really important next step in any conversation. So right now in real time, we're actually looking at how vintage and products can have second life. And I think it's one of these sort of new areas of the conversation. Obviously we have the real and these fashion players that are doing it in a commercial standpoint. But I think sustainability, where Lucy was before, is really about things lasting a long time and then trying to find additional cycles for them past your own single use. And I think that conceptually, that's an area that we all need to consider more, as opposed to just buying things and then thinking, it's a closed loop that ends up in landfill. And then afterwards, we even try to bring it back out, which is definitely something that is a good solution. But thinking long term, it's about how do products, live longer lives. Byron was talking before about an Eames chair. It's not lost on us when we look at furniture over and over and think of these vintage pieces that are actually worth more than the brand new ones that you find in these major furniture stores. And it would be really interesting if you could think of all the products we make in that way, that like craft or antique or vintage, that things gain value over time as opposed to losing value, on Black Friday. And I think that the concepts that we've been working with for the last decade or 2 decades has really taken us in the wrong direction of producing more, discounting them, overinflating prices so that they actually are at the right price at 70% off. And we really need to consider an entirely new language. And I think your dissertation could speak to that, about like, what does the future of how we purchase and how we use products and how they live for longer cycles than our own is really sort of the conversation that I think we'll be having next year with Sarah.
Plenty more to come. Byron, Lucy, do either of you two have a perspective on that?
Go ahead, Lucy.
Thank you. I think the language piece is so critical. Years ago, we did a small piece of research around what language motivates people around sustainability, and the personification, like, you know, the idea of kind of second chance for rubbish and recycling, or, you know, obviously up statusing that to kind of vintage, etc. So I think someone needs to do a big piece on language and vintage and secondhand. It would be great. One other thing is we have a primer, I think it's on the website, it's called Selling Sustainability, and it looks at how you can encourage that consumer whose primary motivation is in sustainability to buy, if you like, and it lays out that you can lean into either functional, emotional, or social benefits, and oftentimes you might even do a mixture of them. So, you know, Nike in its fly knit is a functional benefit. You get better performance from these materials. Never talks about the environmental benefit, or rarely. Parley, another shoe, obviously with Adidas, they do that whole emotional piece around run for the oceans. You know, the messaging around that used to be very much around fishing nets and oceans. And, you know, you look at Adidas here with its brand DNA, you look at Parley there, the two don't talk together at all, but they really brought that together and managed to communicate around oceans and waste and plastics waste in a very compelling, emotional way. Or social benefits. So Fashion Revolution is one of those, you know, getting people to visibly stand up and ask brands who made their clothes every year. Or even Swishing was a campaign we put together almost about 15 years ago now, which brought people together to swap clothes rather than, you know, sending them out to landfill or, you know, whatever it may be. And it worked because it was a party. It was social. It was fun. You could come along, and obviously we can't do it right now, but there's a vaccine. Let's do some more swishing parties. But it really, we hadn't realized until we started putting these parties on how important the social element was. That you could come, you could kind of, someone could say, oh, I wore this, you know, on my wedding day, you know, kind of to my best friend's wedding. It would look amazing on you. So sharing that story, sharing that kind of human connection. So yeah, upping the social side, I think, is one of the biggest things for the secondhand market.
It's interesting because it kind of speaks to the three prongs that Byron and Dexter were talking about earlier. You know, none of it works without the design, and then you have to think about sort of the more commercial and social aspects too. Natalie, does that answer your question?
Yeah, that was great. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much.
I've got a question for Natalie. What are we having for dinner?
Well, at the moment I'm making a curry, so for later.
Making us all hungry, Natalie. Thank you so much for your question.
Thank you. Thanks.
I have another one here from Mansi Shah, who asks, for you, Byron and Dexter, what challenges have you faced when you're trying to discover or source from ethical suppliers? You know, what are the difficulties? You mentioned earlier, you know, just a very thorough vetting process.
I'm gonna go. I'll take that one because it's not even. Well, maybe it's our challenge or our difficulty, but it's equally one to our partners. We have a real live situation. So one of our partners is called Kizuri, and they're amazing social cooperative in Kenya. Dexter and I had a great luxury of visiting them about a year ago, and they have about 300 women workers, single mothers, who are working and making beads and handcraft. It's a really beautiful organization, and we've been working with them on unlimited products. So we actually did developments for some keychains and some Christmas ornaments that we custom designed in partnership with them. And then not even 3 months ago, we got word from them that they had to lay off about 90% of their staff because of COVID. They're down to 35 women they were working on different shifts. And then you're kind of like, in one way, we built this platform so that we could create opportunity for makers from all around the world, whether, again, if they're large organizations or smaller, and you want your platform to be able to deliver that full vision of the impact that we have in mind. And there was kind of little or not enough that we could do in that moment to get those 300 odd people back to work. And so we got together with them. Challenge was, okay, well, they mostly do jewelry. We don't have jewelry on the platform. We actually only did a product together with them. And how willing were we to adjust and develop our business to be able to help and support and meet a moment together with them? Long story short, they still are down to probably 35 or 50 people on the staff. But then we ended up doing a partnership and a collaboration together with them that's launching in spring, because we felt a responsibility to also provide support to the community. Amplify that by 50 partners from around the world. We can't do everything that it is that we're trying to do. And I think Dexter was so right to mention about time. I think one of the biggest challenges is that we have a big vision and we have a big ambition. It'll take time, but it's those impacts at every level that will over time create opportunity and potential for our partners. And I think that lives large in what we do, and to get up out of bed and take the small wins as much as the larger wins as well too.
That's an amazing story. And I think it touches on so many of the things that we've been talking about, the importance of collaboration, the importance of, it's such a move away from from traditional capitalism, where you're really not thinking about your partners in that way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think to where Byron was before. No, I think to where Byron was before. I think we're coming out of this concept of almost this zero-sum game, and I think this relationship that we've had in the past, very market-based, retailer and maker, department store, was all about sort of like moving the risk around. And so if you had a conversation around sustainability or diversity and inclusion, these conversations always had to fit in with who was holding the bag. It was almost like musical chairs. And I think that once, hopefully, and I think your masterclasses speak to this, Sarah, I think we're hopefully moving out of this very rigid concept of competition, where it's a zero-sum game where somebody has to hold the bag, to a much more collaborative, much more cooperative conversation about all of us holding the bag together. At some points, maybe one of us holds it a little harder than the other person, but it builds on something that I think the consumer is ready for. I think when we're having these relationships with our partners and we're asking them, fill out these rigorous assessments, they understand that this is a long-term partnership. If we just called them up and said, could you ship us, 10 of these next week or 1,000 of those next week, then you can feel the relationship has that very transactional pressure to it. When we say that it's going to take time for you to even get on the site, we're going to send our editorials out to tell stories about you. The assessments actually pull out the story. I think it goes to one of your questions that you had before, Sarah.
Mm-hmm.
To get to that narrative, you have to know the story. And whether it's the Chelsea and the lingerie, like once you're able to talk to your factory about the lingerie, that goes to the marketing team right afterwards. And I think that that's what we're trying to build on a day-to-day basis, is to sort of build this moat around story and humanity. And then I think that's very helpful in these trying times when it's not just that maker in Kenya, but we have makers all around that it's challenging for. Shipping things from around the world in the middle of a pandemic isn't easy either. And our business is growing, at light speed. So, we always we have those challenges of making sure that we're responsible through the supply chain as well too.
Yeah, I think this period of uncertainty has created so many opportunities, so many new challenges. And Lucy, I'm going to give you the last word. I'm curious to hear from you. If you feel like, the people you're talking to, your clients or potential clients, they're evolving too, and they're starting to operate a little bit more in the way that Dexter and Byron were just describing.
Yes, I'm going to bridge though, if I may, because in this whole piece around culture, and just as Dexter and Byron have been talking there about our need to reset a little bit, we can't forget that one of the reasons why we're in this mess is that we are marketed to incessantly by the comms industry, and also had fossil fuel promoted to us again and again and again. So I'm just going to do a last shout out. But if we're going to create a culture of solutions, we're kind of putting together a campaign at the moment to get the communications industry to disclose their clients, to try and move us away from this lobbying that we get of fossil fuel behind the scenes. So I just want to put that there. Say, there's sometimes, the system is set up that we are, our status drivers, if you like, have been incessantly pumped by consume more and consume this. And actually that needs to change. So, in terms of material impacts, every industry needs to be looking at its material impacts, including, as I say, the comms lot disclosing their clients. So in order to create that culture for change, we need everyone in on this.
Yeah, I think there is so much to talk about here, and there's sort of a list of amazing questions that we haven't had a chance to get to, but we are unfortunately out of time. We'll just have to have another one of these conversations. I wanted to thank you, Lucy, Byron, and Dexter, for such an amazing, interesting conversation. Thank you to the BoF team for setting this up. Thank you for everyone watching and listening and engaging. This has been a fantastic conversation to end our masterclass series on. And if you want to catch up and really understand how to build a sustainable fashion brand, you will be able to catch all of these online. Thank you very much, everyone, and have a wonderful Christmas.
Thank you. Happy holidays.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Lucy.